Comrades, we're all aware of the situation going on right now in the Philippines. The Typhoon Haiyan has claimed the lives of several thousand people, and 100,000 more have been affected by the disaster. Now, what is not being readily reported in the media is how this situation is actually becoming worse. Going on in the media right now is a bit of a war between the Western media and the media locally in the Philippines. The most famous of this, or getting the most attention, is the situation that's going on between the local media and Anderson Cooper of CNN. Now, what's going on is the government of the Philippines is basically understating how bad everything is and presenting false images of how there's recovery and assistance coming into the people. Like, they'll deliberately go out and say that the roads are now open and clear and people are free to travel. Yet foreign media can just go 3 blocks away and see that that's actually not true, and then they broadcast those images to the West. What's happening here is that the government of the Philippines is essentially, in collusion with the bourgeois media, is trying to cover up exactly how bad the situation is and how the government is literally not doing much of anything at all to assist those who are facing this disaster right now. The government, in collusion with the bourgeois media, is essentially trying to cover it up. This is some of what's being reported. From Cooper's vantage point, there were hundreds of people sleeping in the airport because there was nowhere for them to go. And if one would just walk 3 blocks away from the airport, there were also people sleeping in makeshift huts or out exposed to the rains, even lying next to the bodies of their loved ones because these had yet to be picked up. He said there was also very little water and food supply because there was no feeding station, which according to him was what one would expect after 5 days. The journalist added that he only heard of talks about the airport being opened again by the U.S. Marines, but it hadn't happened yet. He warned that the situation is getting desperate and that sooner or later something is bound to give. The government of the Philippines is paralyzed right now, and it is not responding to the disaster. Many people, tons of sources, are reporting that military bases throughout the Philippines are just merely standing there and are not actively out doing anything. And in fact, many of them are not even in states of preparedness where they know they're going to be sent out at any moment to do anything. The government is literally just standing by while people are suffering. The international community, many foreign leaders, are calling for the leadership that is genuinely lacking during this emergency. The government is not prepared to deal with this situation and does not know how to respond to it. Now, this whole being unprepared for the disaster is actually nothing new for the government of Aquino. Previously, in Typhoon Sendong, there was supposedly an emergency fund to help the people who were devastated by the typhoon. The people in Mindanao were devastated by this. Now, this money was never funded. There was supposed to be a huge, stockpile of cash ready to help victims of typhoons, and yet that money just never existed. It never got out to deal with the situation. In fact, the government has already been found responsible for the kind of negligence that we are seeing right now. In the past, the government has been found basically guilty for not helping people and being unprepared to deal with these kinds of situations. And in fact, many described it as just having a cold-blooded indifference to the suffering of the masses of Filipino people. What does this say about the Philippines? That even the money of the people who own the wealth, who do the work that generates this wealth, can't even be spent on themselves to pull themselves out of this type of situation. Not even the people's own money, tax money, can be spent to help themselves. This shows the sheer, true, cold-blooded indifference that the ruling class within the Philippines actually have, and the bureaucrat capitalists, and how much they disregard the lives of the people. Corruption is widespread throughout the Philippine government and the country in general. And this certainly demonstrates that. This money is nowhere to be found. In fact, I would not be surprised if it turned up that this money had actually been stolen. Now, what's really interesting about all this is the fact that the government, or at least the media in this situation, is trying to attack the NPA in the midst of all this chaos. Now, the NPA, with what very little resources it has, is trying to help the people facing this situation. And it seems that the media, or maybe even the government, is determined to attack them even during this desperate time. The media in the Philippines is actually reporting that the New People's Army attacked an aid convoy, where supposedly in Tacloban, 15 NPA guerrillas attacked a convoy and 2 of those guerrillas were killed with no losses on the Philippine government side. However, the police, the National Police Force of the Philippines states that no such attack ever took place, which means the police are confirming that this attack never happened. Yet for some reason, the media in the Philippines keeps running with the story, claiming that it did happen, when those who would have been at least associated with the convoy say that no such attack ever happened. The bourgeois, even in the midst of possibly one of the worst disasters the people of the Philippines have ever faced, is more incensed on attacking the NPA, those who actually stand for the people, than reporting the truth of the situation, and that the government has been almost completely useless, that the bureaucrats in office care nothing for the people, and that they are knowingly spreading lies about the situation on the ground and trying to make it look better than it actually is. The bourgeois media is standing here slandering the NPA, meanwhile covering up the genuine, real crimes of the Filipino government. As if all of this wasn't bad enough, it has now been reported and confirmed by the Department of Foreign Affairs that U.S. Marines are preventing international aid from being sent to people in the Philippines. That's right, the U.S. Marines, as confirmed by the Department of Foreign Affairs, the U.S. Department of Foreign Affairs, are preventing aid being sent from various countries to go to the Filipino people. So not only is the government completely incompetent and not helping the situation at all, there's a foreign army in the Philippines preventing that aid from going to the people. Unfortunately, there has been no explanation as to why this is happening. Why are the U.S. Marines preventing that aid from reaching the people? No one seems to have an answer, and as far as I know from the research I've done, no explanation has been forthcoming. The U.S. Marines were reportedly instructed not to let Philippine government officials and politicians touch the relief goods that will arrive in Samar. 5 C-130 planes are scheduled to arrive carrying relief goods from the United Nations. I know it might seem impossible, but the situation actually gets even worse. Charitable donations that are being made for this disaster, for the people suffering, are being withheld due to taxes. Meaning, in the midst of this gigantic humanitarian crisis in the Philippines, the Philippine government is demanding that taxes be paid on all donations meant to help the people that are suffering, over 100,000 Filipino pesos. And considering the exchange rate between the US dollar and Filipino peso, that's a very small amount of money. Meaning, basically every donation that's coming is now being taxed by the government. So when the people's money isn't even being used to help the people, those who do step forward and give money are being stopped by the same people who refuse the people to use their own money to save themselves. How absolutely disgusting is this? Under Section 98 of the National Internal Revenue Code, direct or indirect gifts, real and personal, properties, tangible or intangible assets under 100,000 pesos will be exempt from taxes. However, a tax of anywhere from 2 to 15% will be charged on donations worth anywhere from 100,000 to 10 million pesos. And in this, we see the utter, brutal, ugly face of capitalism, with every vestige of social democracy, or however much of it could ever exist in the Philippines, completely torn off and laid bare for exactly what it is. The government is literally taking away aid dollars to try to take care of the crisis that they themselves cannot carry out themselves. How low do you have to be to tax aid to those that you can't help because of your own incompetence, your own corruption? I would not be surprised that this money that's being taxed was also being stolen. I mean, what's this tax money going to go to? Well, we know it's not going to go to helping the people who are suffering from the typhoon right now, because that money is already not going to them. And even if you were going to stand from the premise that this tax money was going to be used for that, then why not just let it pass through anyway and go directly to those who need it, to go directly to the supplies who need it? This is the sheer cold-blooded indifference the capitalist imperialist system has towards the Filipino people and many people who are suffering around the world. With this disaster, we see literally how little the Philippine government cares for its own people. We see how inhuman the very system itself is. This is entirely on the head of the capitalist state and the bourgeois who wield power over it. And one thing that concerns me that may happen after all this is how much farmland has been destroyed because of this. There is a potential famine on the horizon because enough farmland in the country has been destroyed. Will it happen? I think there's actually a very good chance that it can happen. It may not happen, but there is a definite real threat. The fact that not only is this not being taken seriously, the suffering of people, and then you add on top of it the possibility of a famine which could kill thousands more. It's just simply unbelievable. Nothing more could possibly demonstrate why people's war in the Philippines is necessary now more than ever before. You cannot say that any of the democratic institutions within the government care anything for the people. Nothing but a complete and total reorganization of the country along the Marxist-Leninist Maoist line will be able to solve any of the problems that are being faced by this society right now.
Thank you for watching.
Or
Go ahead, rate, comment, subscribe, share on various social media. If you want, there's some other great content here you can check out.
By the natural disaster.